Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Moonbeam Musings. So, today we're talking to Mish Vizard about the Celts. So, the Celts, I'm going to give you a brief introduction before we start. So, the Celts were a network of tribal societies that emerged during the Iron Age around 1200 BCE in Central Europe, with origins linked to the Hulstat culture, which was around 800 BCE, in what's now called Austria. Expanding west into France, Spain, and into the British Isles, and east as far as Turkey, the Celts became known for their intricate metalwork, spiritual practices, and warrior culture. The LA10 period, 450 BCE, marked the height of their artistic and cultural expression. Although Roman conquest led to the decline of the Celtic influence in much of mainland Europe, their traditions endured in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Festivals like Samhain, Beltane, and embolic have survived, evolving into modern celebrations such as Halloween and St. Bridget's Day. Today, Celtic culture lives on throughout language, music, and rituals, reflecting the enduring legacy of these ancient peoples. So, thank you, Mish Vizard, for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself before we move on to talk about the Celts?
Yeah, hi Philip. Thanks for having me. So I guess my relation to the Celts and Celtic traditions is my heritage. So I've got Irish background through my grandma. She's from Mayo, and I hold dual nationality, Irish and British. So I guess the thing that connects me is my spiritual practice. So I'm a witch. I'm a hedge witch, which means I'm a kind of solo practitioner. And I've been interested in all things witchy since I was a teenager, really. Probably started with the kind of the aesthetic of it and being a bit of a goth and all that kind of thing that then evolved into really learning more and more about it over the years. I'm professionally, I've been a clinician as a clinical background, which links in with, if you think the history of witches and that healer and wise woman and herbalist and that kind of thing. And yeah, everything to do with kind of the Celtic, I guess, culture, specifically around paganism and the pagan wheel really appeals to me. One myth about witches that I want to bust is that all witches are pagan or Wiccan, and we're not. You can have witches from any background or no religion at all. I'm actually Christo-pagan, which is for me, I guess it's about honouring the divine female, feminine, the female, and understanding those cycles and the balance of male and female energies in how we worship and how we can with the land and kind of thing. My favourite Celtic goddess is Anya, and that's who I would pay homage to. If I'm, if I'm doing a little wish or something, I'm like, oh, Goddess Anya, I need you right now, and I need your support. And she embodies sovereignty and love and summer. I guess if you was going to marry her up with the Roman and Greek gods, she'd be like Aphrodite or Venus and that kind of thing. And she's into the rhythms of the land. So I guess through that lens, I explore Celtic traditions and I guess the sense of identity and spirituality around that. Hope I've not gone on too long, but that's kind of my connection to it all.
No, thank you. That gives us a really thorough introduction, really, because I think there is a lot of misconceptions about witches and pagans. Um, so to start with, maybe do you know an overview of what shaped the Celtic belief system and their connection to maybe nature and the land?
Well, it's very rooted in the environment, so it's all about the land. I mean, if you think about in your introduction, you talked about the Celtic, I guess, nations, if you like, from Austria and Scandinavia and the Vikings and in Scotland, Wales, Isle of Man, Ireland, all these kind of Celtic places. It was a world of rivers, forests, mountains, and kind of guess changing seasons. And these natural elements were viewed very much as sacred. So they didn't see themselves as separate from nature. Everything was one, and they're very much, part of it and living and breathing. They believed trees were living things, and so I guess in terms of the Celtic belief systems and their connection to the land, it's just they were part of it. I guess is the easiest way to kind of summarise that. And also, if you think about that reverence and how it shaped their deities, so many of them were associated with specific natural elements, like the rivers. You had Bawan, or the sun. You had Lu, and there's that spiritual framework was kind of influenced by practical needs. So farming and aligning with the land's rhythms were vital, really, for survival and kind of those farming practices.
What do you think the values are that underpin most Celtic rituals and practices?
Um, I guess there's three key principles that would come to mind for me. One is interconnectedness. The other one is balance, which I already talked about. It's like that whole yin and yang, and reciprocity. I can't say it. Reciprocity. I can't speak today.
Reciprocation or
Yeah, that kind of thing. So it's all
yeah.
about that giving and taking, and you give back and you take from the land. So everything, they saw it as a cycle. The Celts would very much see life as a cycle, I guess, and emphasizing that harmony between opposing forces like light and dark, good and bad, life and death. And you see that in the wheel, for example, two key opposites there. You've got Samhain, which is all about life, about death, and the marking of the end of the harvest as we go into winter. And then you've got like Beltane, which is life and rebirth and renewal. So everything's kind of got these harmonies. So I think they're the three principles, really, and that reciprocation was essential, because so like offerings were given to the land or gods as a way to kind of maintain balance and show gratitude. And also there's a little dose of superstition in there as well. If you didn't say do a offering to the gods, then something bad might happen, or your crops might fail, or that kind of thing. So that's very much part of it. And also community and kinship were vital. So rituals strengthen bonds within a tribe, and these kind of comings together would very much be part of their life, really, and living and breathing.
And thank you. How do you think they use those rituals to foster a sense of community in a collective way?
Um, I guess it's the ritualistic fact. So humans, we like ritual, don't we? We like things to repeat. It's like, when we think about, we've just had Christmas, for example, and we like to know what's coming each year. And I think as part of that, you would have these communal events, which often involved feasting, storytelling, shared offerings, music, dancing, that kind of thing, which we still see today, actually. But they reinforced that kind of like a shared identity. Um, I guess not just to the tribe and the community, but also to their ancestors. So they were always about the past, the present, and the future. So the past would be looking back and reflecting on the year that's gone, or their ancestors. The present, like what's happening right now, we're celebrating, or we're giving thanks, or we're doing an offering. And then looking forward, what's coming down the line, what can we expect, what can we celebrate that we're going to look forward to, whether it be summer or a good harvest, or whatever that might be. Um, so yeah, I think it's all about really using rituals to foster that community and passing on their identity. So that, I talked about this, the storytelling and the oral traditions. A lot of that is how the culture was passed on, because they weren't writing things down at this stage, and historically they might not have had that ability, although you see things passed on through symbolism. So there'd be a lot of Celtic images and symbols that you would see, but really it's creating that collective narrative to kind of strengthen bonds and preserve the tradition, really, I would say.
Hmm. I think we've touched on this in another aspect, but do you think that act of honouring ancestors and the dead was more about respect, fear, or maintaining a sense of continuity?
um I think it's a bit of all of those.
Mm.
I think it was important to show respect for the ancestors. Is I mean, Samhain is just really like one great big wake. It's the veil thins, and it's a chance to kind of pay respects. You might think about people you've lost that year. It might be you might go back further and just kind of pay reverence to your ancestors and how your tribe or your community evolved. So that's very much about that respect and gratitude. But then there was also a dose of fear, I guess, around the superstitions. So things like, leaving out a actually carved turnip or swede to ward away the evil spirits. Because if the veil's thin, then, you're going to get spirits, and not all of them are friendly. So you want to be able to connect with your ancestors, but also keep away any nasty, I guess, unfriendly spirits and that kind of thing. So that's where the kind of the fear, I would say, comes into it. And then I guess it's that, again, come back to that identity and the wisdom they're passing on through these traditions. And it's, I guess, that connection to, I guess, the bridge between the living elements of the Celtic traditions, like the farming and the practical stuff, and then the spiritual side of things, which we very much see with birth, life, death, marriage, hand fasting, all those kinds of things. I mean, it's really hard because to talk about Celts in a podcast like this is fantastic, but really, I guess you either go mile wide, inch deep, or you could pick one topic and we could go a mile deep on, something niche like just talking about St. Patrick's Day or just talking about the tradition of marriage or those kinds of things. So there's a lot to cover.
Yeah, I understand. I understand we're touching the topic today.
We
Maybe
are.
you can come back and what we get demands for, we can talk about in further in depth. So, um, okay, so how about storytelling and myth? Because that plays a part in the Celtic traditions, doesn't it? Is there what's the reason behind that, do you
Yeah, I
think?
mean, a lot of the kind of storytelling and the myths would revolve around, um, I guess, some of the Celtic deities as well. So, I talked about Anya, which is my favourite goddess. You've got Bridget, and you've got there's loads and loads of Celtic gods. Um, so there'd be stories told about them, and like in the same way you'd hear about Romans talking about their gods, or Greeks talking about their gods, Vikings. Again, like Odin and all these kinds of things. They're all kind of branches of the same kind of belief system, where you've got these pagan deities that tend to connect with the land, like I said before, whether it be the trees or the rivers or the sun or the moon. And so all this was kind of we weaved into the stories that they would tell, as well as their own personal stories of, how their landscape was shaped. And so, for example, in Scotland, you would hear the stories of the Cailleach and how the mountains and the vales of the Highlands and were kind of carved by her wooden staff, and when she would shape nature with the snow and those kinds of things. So all these kind of stories would be told around the fire, and I guess there's so many facets to it, even within the Celtic traditions of just the British Isles and Ireland and Scotland and Wales. You've got so many different words for all these things. And actually, one of the most fascinating places I've been to around relating to all of this is the Isle of Man. There's so much to go and see there that's still intact. So if you're a big fan of Druid sites and kind of investigating some of this and symbolism, definitely go to the Isle of Man, because there's some really cool kind of, I guess, landmarks and heritage sites that picks up on all of this. But yeah, I feel like I'm maybe repeating some stuff, but it's yeah, it's all about really that connection to the land, I'd say, Philippa.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's fine. I think it's good to reinforce it and link everything back together again, especially for those of us that don't have as much knowledge. I mean, my ancestry is Welsh, but I only have a small amount of knowledge on this, which is why I'm so interested, and I appreciate you coming to talk to us.
I do apologise for Marmalade trying to get in on the podcast.
Why do you think, so if we move on to, you're talking about symbols, why do you think trees, especially oak and yew, held such powerful symbolism in the Celtic tradition? Was it a practical reason or a deeper connection?
Um, I guess there's a spiritual connection there. So they very much kind of saw trees as living entities, which is what I was kind of talking about before. Um, and you've probably seen the images of the tree with the roots going into the ground and that kind of thing, like the tree of life. And it was seen as connecting the heavens to the earth and the underworld as well. And then you've got symbolism for specific types of trees. So the oak is very much about strength and wisdom. The yew tree is associated with death and rebirth. If you and the yew tree was actually used a lot sacred druid sites. So the monks, for example, and druids would lie under yew trees, and so when you've got the sun hitting the branches and the berries, you would almost get like they could get high off it, and they would have visions, and they would have spiritual journeys from kind of the essence of the yew tree. It's an interesting one. You should have a look at it. And what you'll find is, because they were sacred trees on sacred sites, a lot of churches were built on these druid sites. So almost always, if you go to a graveyard, you'll see yew trees, and that's because or churchyards, you'll see yew trees, and that's because they've invariably predate the church, and churches were built on those sacred sites. Because of, and that connection to death as well, you'll see them in churchyards.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. And what about the wells and springs in Celtic customs as well?
Yeah, so again, these were often not just sources of essential life force, that is water. They were seen as sacred spaces. They would sometimes have rituals at the site of the water or the spring. If a new spring was found, it would often be celebrated with some kind of blessing or ritual. Is it very much connected to the source, really. I think we've almost lost some of this, haven't we? And I think I almost think recently I've seen a real revival in people becoming interested in it again, and we're seeing a massive increase in people. Some people joining things like religions like paganism and Wiccan, but also people not really attaching themselves to a specific religion as such, but just celebrating the wheel more. So I'm connected to a community organisation, and who are putting on events around the wheel, and we're seeing a lot of people come into these celebrations with their families, with their children, to join in and celebrate like Beltane or Samhain in the traditional ways, but not necessarily with any kind of previous connection to any kind of pagan type religion. They're just interested in it again. I think people are looking for that connection and community, and I think that's lovely, really.
Mm, yeah, must say I've been to one of those events, which is where I've met you, and it was very lovely. Yeah, very nice. So, I guess something that I have a question on as well is the sacrifices. You spoke about giving to the land, the giving and taking, but there were sacrifices, and what was the symbolism behind them, really?
Well, you often see, so if you were to look in media and TV, you'll see these sacrifices are always kind of, I guess they're sensationalized. You'll see, like, if you watched Vikings, for example, which is, shows a lot of elements of pagan belief systems. It shows quite gory detail and that kind of thing. And I think, one, that's sensationalized, and two, looking more towards the Celt side of things, while some of those practices did happen, they were done in a very respectful way, and it was very much about again, this whole balance of giving back to the land. For example, in Samhain, when they'd bring the sheep down from the pastures, and they'd light fires, they'd invariably sacrifice, say, a ram or a goat or something like that. One, to give thanks for the harvest, and also for superstitious elements, to make sure that they had a good winter, and that that the winter wasn't too unkind to them, and then that ram or that goat would invariably be consumed by the community as part of the feasting, as part of the celebrations and that kind of thing. So it wasn't just kind of like this wasted spilt blood type thing, and sometimes the sacrifices were not you know the death of an animal at all. They would sometimes be, you'd leave out some bread, or for the gods, or you'd leave so many pieces of fruit on the tree for the gods, or for the animals and that kind of thing. So you would never take everything, and I think that's one of the running themes as well when it comes to the Celts. When harvesting, they wouldn't say apples, they wouldn't strip the entire tree. They'd always leave one or two for nature, or for the gods.
Oh, thank you. In terms of, say, I don't know if you know anything about how they all organized. I mean, now it's slightly different, but how it was organized in terms of when running celebrations or generally. For example, were there people that tended to lead
Yeah,
groups?
definitely.
Yeah.
You'd have your community leaders, you'd have your spiritual leaders. Druids and seers were seen as kind of like intellectual, spiritual leaders in Celtic society. They would be knowledgeable, and I guess were seen as mediators between the mortal and the divine. They'd often be seen as having a gift. Um, they would often guide people with decisions and that kind of thing, and be very much at the heart of these big community celebrations. I'm quite sure, it was very much like it is today, with women invariably doing lots of cooking and preparing foods, and men, maybe putting up makeshift gazebos type tents. I don't know even know what it's how to explain it, but they would everybody would be involved, and everyone would have their role to play, and there would be leaders and elders of the community that would be very much at the heart of the organising, which is kind of what you see today. Even like when I was talking about the events at the borough, we very much come together as a team, and everyone's kind of got the strengths and weaknesses, and it just fits like a jigsaw, and then we all bring different aspects of knowledge or the spiritual to the celebrations, and I guess it wasn't that much different to that, to be fair, Philippa. And I think that wisdom and that sense of reverence and respecting your elders was so crucial, and I think that's another thing we've sadly lost, and I think part of that's down to displaced ways that we live now as family units. You'd very much all stay together as a family in the same village, in the same community, whereas now we're all over the place. I'm from Manchester originally, and I live down here in Surrey, and my daughter's in Newcastle, and my family's up in Huddersfield and Manchester, and I think we've kind of lost that. So I think there's definitely a need for more of that community again, where we have elders held aloft and respected, and that kind of thing. But yeah, probably going off at tangent again.
No, no, that's brilliant. I mean, I think that's what's sort of coming round. I mean, in the previous podcast, we've spoken about animism and Aline from, we went very much into the scientific world, and we're moving a little bit more back into communities and into this world as you spoke about earlier. And so more people showing up at your events makes perfect sense of where we are. And that's why I think it's very important that we talk more about and talk about these things so people can understand them more, because there may be people out there that are more interested now in this topic and want to look into it further because they too are looking for a sense of community. I guess, we're pretty much there, and I really appreciate the time today. Just to finish off, I wonder if there's one key lesson you think we could take from the Celts. What would it be if there was one?
I would say it's the importance of kind of living in that harmony, and not seeing ourselves as separate to everything else. There's like quite often there's humans and we consume, and then there's everything else and how it meets our needs. And actually, we shouldn't be in the centre with all this revolving around us. We should all be part of that as a whole. And so, just taking some more time to think about how we give back to the land, to our community, to each other, I think that's really important. And try and have a look for local events in your area. I mean, today, for example, I mean, we talked about Celtic celebrations, but today, I'm trying to remember the name of. Oh, today is Nolag Maban, which is Women's Christmas in the Celtic tradition. So it's not actually a pagan festival; it's just a Celtic celebration specifically to Ireland and related to Epiphany, which is today. And it was Women's Christmas, and it was all about women having a day of rest after all the efforts of Christmas time and Yule time, and connecting with their friends, the girly friends, and all the women that they love, and just having a day off and chilling out. And I think so. There's so many different lovely festivals. I think it would be good for us to kind of look around us and see what's on in your local area. Connect to organisations that are kind of putting on events. If you look, I will give you the link. You can share it. But there's a directory, for example, of wassailing events coming up. So the next week or so, you'll see lots of wassailing events where people are dancing, running around orchards, and wishing for good things for the year. So yeah, look out for events in your area and really try and connect and to the land and the community and nature, really. I think that would be it in a nutshell.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mish. We're going to add all the notes below in the description, your Instagram, and some of the things that you've mentioned today, and the events link that you just mentioned there, we can add as well. So I really appreciate you coming and informing all the listeners about the Celtic traditions, and hopefully we'll have you back on in the future as well. So we'll see what everyone resonates with in the topic, and we can dive deeper next
Yeah,
time.
definitely. It's so broad, isn't it? But thank you for having me. It's been nice to have a natter. I hope I didn't go off on too many tangents.
No,
But
definitely
yeah,
not.
lovely to talk.
Thank you.